The text message came through at 11:45 on a Tuesday night, and it changed everything about my relationship with the Riverside Meadows Homeowners Association forever. I was sitting on my couch in my house in Naperville, Illinois, wearing sweatpants and a ratty old Northwestern hoodie, halfway through a documentary about deep-sea creatures when my phone buzzed. The name that popped up made my stomach drop even before I read the words. Patricia Hendricks, HOA President. Mr. Warren Ingram, you have 12 hours to clear all ice from your sidewalk section per HOA Covenant Section 7.4.2 or face daily fines of $150. This is your final warning. The ice has been present for 36 hours and poses a liability risk to the community. I stared at the screen, reading it 3 times to make sure I understood correctly. It was almost midnight. The temperature outside was 14 degrees Fahrenheit. The ice she was referring to had formed 2 days ago when a water main break 2 streets over had flooded half the neighborhood, including the public sidewalk in front of my house. Not my private walkway, not my driveway, the public sidewalk that the city was supposed to maintain. I typed back, "The sidewalk is city property. I already called Public Works yesterday." 3 dots appeared immediately. Patricia was awake and ready for battle. HOA covenants clearly state that homeowners are responsible for clearing ice and snow from sidewalk sections adjacent to their property within 24 hours of formation, regardless of city ordinances. You signed these covenants when you purchased your home. Clear the ice or pay the fine. Your choice. I stood up and walked to my front window, pulling back the curtain. Street lights illuminated the thick sheet of ice that covered the sidewalk in front of my house. It was not just a thin layer. When the water main had broken, the resulting flood had been substantial. The water had pooled and frozen into a solid mass at least 2 inches thick in some places, extending across the entire width of the sidewalk and stretching about 30 feet along my property line. I had already salted it twice. I had chipped at it with an ice scraper. Nothing had made a dent. The temperatures had not risen above 20 degrees in days, and more cold weather was forecasted for the next week. My phone buzzed again. I will be conducting a compliance check at noon tomorrow. Have it cleared by then. Something inside me snapped. I had been dealing with Patricia and her ridiculous HOA demands for 2 years. Ever since she had been elected president by a margin of 3 votes in a neighborhood election, where only 12% of residents had bothered to show up. In that time, I had been fined for leaving my garbage cans visible from the street for more than 2 hours after pickup, for planting flowers that were not on the approved list, and for parking my work truck in my own driveway overnight because it had a small company logo on the side. I had paid every fine, made every correction, and followed every absurd rule. But this was different. This was not my fault, not my responsibility, and frankly not safe for me to attempt in these temperatures with the equipment I had available. I looked at the clock. 11:53. I looked back at the ice. Then I walked to my garage. 20 minutes later, I was standing on my front lawn in insulated coveralls, heavy gloves, and safety goggles, holding my propane-powered blowtorch that I normally used for caramelizing creme brulee and doing minor welding projects. It was rated for temperatures up to 3,000 degrees. The ice did not stand a chance. I fired it up. The blue flame roared to life with a satisfying whoosh that cut through the silent suburban night. I walked up to the ice sheet and pointed the flame directly at its surface. The effect was immediate and incredibly satisfying. The ice began to melt, creating rivulets of water that ran down into the storm drain at the corner. I moved slowly, methodically, sweeping the torch back and forth across the frozen surface. Steam rose in billowing clouds that caught the street light and glowed orange in the darkness. I had been at it for maybe 5 minutes when I heard the first door open. My neighbor to the right, Sylvia Morrison, stepped out onto her porch in a bathrobe. "Warren, what on earth are you doing?" "Clearing ice, Sylvia. HOA orders." She squinted at the torch in my hands. "Is that safe?" "Probably more safe than me trying to chip this off and breaking my back or cracking the concrete underneath." She considered this, nodded, and went back inside. I returned to my work. 3 more minutes passed before another door opened. This time it was Jim Kowalski from across the street. He walked over in his slippers, hands shoved in his jacket pockets. "Patricia got to you too, huh?" I did not stop torching. "Yep, you, last week. I spent 4 hours with a pickaxe on that ice, threw my back out. She still fined me because I was 3 hours past her deadline. She's out of control. You are telling me." He watched me work for a moment. "That is genius, though. Can I borrow that tomorrow? I have got another patch forming near my mailbox." "Sure thing." By the time I had cleared about half of the ice, a small crowd had gathered. It was now 12:30 in the morning, and I had 5 neighbors standing on the sidewalk watching me operate a blowtorch in the middle of the night, like it was some kind of neighborhood entertainment. Denise Park, who lived 4 houses down, had even brought out a thermos of hot chocolate and was offering cups to everyone. The whole scene had taken on a bizarre, almost festive atmosphere. "I cannot believe Patricia is making you do this at midnight," Denise said, handing me a cup. I turned off the torch for a moment to take a sip. "She gave me until noon tomorrow. I am doing it now out of spite." Everyone laughed. It felt good. For the first time since moving into this neighborhood, I felt like I was among friends rather than just people who happened to live near each other and were bound by the same oppressive set of rules. "She tried to fine me for having the wrong shade of beige on my shutters," Denise said. "The wrong shade of beige. She made us remove a bird feeder because it was not mentioned in the approved outdoor decorations list," Jim added. "A bird feeder." The stories kept coming. Martha Chen talked about being fined for having her newspapers pile up while she was in the hospital for surgery. Robert Williams described being threatened with legal action because his grass was a 1/4 inch too tall during a week when his mower was broken. Every single person had a tale of Patricia's tyrannical enforcement of rules that seemed designed purely to make people's lives miserable. I finished my hot chocolate and fired up the torch again. The crowd cheered. It was ridiculous and wonderful at the same time. By 1:15 in the morning, I had cleared the entire section of sidewalk in front of my house. The concrete was wet but ice-free, and the water was already starting to freeze again at the edges, but at least I had done what Patricia demanded. I had cleared the ice. I was packing up my equipment when headlights turned onto our street. A police cruiser rolled up slowly and stopped in front of my house. My stomach dropped. Officer Martinez stepped out, his hand resting casually on his belt. "Evening, folks. Got a call about someone operating dangerous equipment in a residential area. Someone want to tell me what is going on here." I stepped forward. "That would be me, officer. I was clearing ice from the sidewalk with a blowtorch." He looked at the torch in my hands, then at the clear sidewalk, then at the small crowd of neighbors still gathered around. "A blowtorch?" "Yes, sir. HOA demanded I clear it by noon today. It is technically today now, so I figured I would get a head start. At 1 in the morning. The HOA president is very strict about deadlines, officer." Martinez sighed deeply, the sigh of a man who had dealt with HOA complaints before. "Anyone get hurt? Any property damage?" "No, sir." "Was he being unsafe or reckless in any way?" Martinez directed this question at my neighbors. They all shook their heads. Jim spoke up. He was wearing safety equipment and being real careful, officer, just trying to follow the HOA rules. Martinez looked at me for a long moment. Next time, maybe do this at a more reasonable hour. Use salt like a normal person. I tried salt, officer. This ice is from the water main break 2 days ago. It is too thick. The water main break that the city has not cleaned up yet. That would be the one. Martinez shook his head. Let me guess. Patricia Hendricks sent you a violation notice. The fact that he knew her name told me everything I needed to know. You have dealt with her before. Every officer in this district has dealt with her. She calls us at least twice a week. He closed his notebook. You folks get inside and get some sleep. And Mr. Ingram, put the torch away. If I get called out here again tonight, I am going to be less understanding. Yes, sir. Thank you, officer. After Martinez left, the crowd dispersed quickly. Everyone was suddenly aware of how late it was and how cold we had all gotten standing around. I put my equipment away in the garage and went inside, exhausted but feeling oddly triumphant. I took a photo of the clear sidewalk with my phone, time stamped at 1:37 in the morning, just as evidence that I had completed the task. Then I collapsed into bed. The next morning, I woke up to 17 text messages. 12 of them were from neighbors I had barely spoken to before last night, thanking me for standing up to Patricia and asking if I would be willing to attend the next HOA meeting to raise concerns about her leadership. 3 were from Jim, who wanted to know when he could borrow the blowtorch. 1 was from my mother, asking why people were posting about me on Facebook at 2 in the morning, which was its own kind of concerning. The last message was from Patricia, sent at 7:30 that morning. Mr. Ingram, I have been informed that you used an open flame device on HOA property last night without proper permits or authorization. This constitutes a violation of Section 9.2.1 regarding unauthorized modifications or maintenance of common areas. You are fined $300. Additionally, upon inspection this morning, I observed that your sidewalk is showing signs of ice reformation. Original fine of $150 still applies. Total owed, $450. Payment due within 7 days. I stared at my phone in disbelief. I had cleared the ice exactly as she demanded, and now she was fining me for the method I used and for the fact that ice was naturally reforming in sub-freezing temperatures. I called in sick to work. My job as a software consultant could wait. This could not. I spent the morning researching Illinois HOA laws, our specific community covenants, and any legal precedents for homeowner disputes. What I found was both enlightening and infuriating. First, the city of Naperville was indeed responsible for clearing ice from public sidewalks, not homeowners. The HOA covenant Patricia was citing actually said homeowners were responsible for clearing ice from their private walkways and property access points, which would mean my driveway and the path to my front door. The public sidewalk was explicitly the city's jurisdiction. Second, the fine for unauthorized use of equipment on common areas only applied to permanent modifications or maintenance of HOA-owned property like park benches, community signs, or shared landscaping. The public sidewalk was not HOA property. Third, and most importantly, Patricia had been issuing fines and violations without properly convening the HOA board. According to our bylaws, the president could send warnings, but actual fines had to be approved by a majority vote of the 5-member board. I checked the meeting minutes posted on the HOA website. There had not been an official board meeting in 4 months. Patricia had been acting unilaterally, issuing fines that had no legal standing whatsoever. I started going through my own records. Over the past 2 years, I had paid Patricia's fake HOA fines totaling nearly $2,000. I felt sick. How many other neighbors had done the same? I sent a group text to everyone who had given me their number last night. Emergency meeting at my house tonight at 7 p.m. I found something about the fines. Bring any violation notices you have received from Patricia. Then, I did something I probably should have done 2 years ago. I requested copies of all HOA financial records, board meeting minutes, and current roster of board members. According to Illinois law, HOA members were entitled to review these documents with reasonable notice. I sent my formal request via email to the HOA's official address, copying all 5 board members whose contact information was listed on the website. Patricia responded within 20 minutes. Mr. Ingram, your request for records is noted. However, due to the sensitive nature of financial information and privacy concerns, we require board approval for such requests. The next scheduled board meeting is in 6 weeks. Your request will be considered at that time. Please note that your outstanding fines remain due regardless of this request. Failure to pay within the specified time frame will result in additional penalties and potential legal action. I forwarded her response to Jim, who I had learned was a real estate attorney. He called me immediately. Warren, this is completely illegal. She has to provide those records within 30 days maximum, and she certainly cannot require board approval. Illinois Compiled Statutes, Chapter 765, Section 605/18.4. It is clear as day. So what do I do? You send her one more email, formally citing the statute and giving her 15 days to comply. If she does not, you can take the HOA to court and you will win. Easily. You can even recover legal fees. What about the fines she has been issuing? There was a pause on the other end. What do you mean? I explained what I had discovered about the lack of board meetings and Patricia issuing fines without proper authorization. Jim was quiet for a long moment. Warren, if what you are saying is true, Patricia might have been committing fraud. Those fines were not legally valid. If she collected money under false pretenses, that is a crime. How do we prove it? Tonight's meeting. Get everyone to bring their documentation. I will come too. We will figure this out. By 7 p.m., my living room was packed with 23 neighbors, all holding manila folders full of violation notices, fine receipts, and frustrated energy. Jim had brought his laptop and a portable projector. We set it up to display on my wall. Okay, everyone, I started, feeling nervous about addressing this many people. Thank you for coming. I know this is unusual, but I think Patricia has been taking advantage of all of us, and it is time we did something about it. I explained what I had discovered about the fines requiring board approval and the lack of official board meetings. Then, I asked everyone to share their experiences. The stories were worse than I had imagined. Martha Chen had paid over $3,000 in fines over the past year for violations ranging from holiday decorations being up too long to having a wreath on her door that was not the approved size. Denise Park had paid $1,500 for various landscaping infractions. Robert Williams had been fined repeatedly for his teenager's car being parked on the street overnight, totaling nearly $2,000. Jim projected a spreadsheet on the wall where we recorded every fine, every violation, and every payment. By 8:30, we had documented over $47,000 in fines collected by Patricia over the past 2 years. Here is the thing, Jim said, standing up to address the room. None of these fines were valid. Patricia has been operating without board oversight, issuing penalties she had no authority to issue, and collecting money under false pretenses. That is fraud. "But we all signed the HOA covenants when we bought our houses," someone said from the back. "Does not that give her the authority?" "The covenants give the HOA authority, not Patricia personally. The HOA is supposed to be governed by a board with checks and balances. She has been acting like a dictator." Jim pulled up another document. "Look at this. According to the bylaws, the president cannot issue fines over $50 without board approval. She has been issuing fines of $100, $200, even $500 in some cases, all on her own." "So what do we do?" Denise asked. "We call an emergency HOA meeting. Any 5 members can petition for one, and it has to be held within 14 days. We vote to remove Patricia as president and elect new leadership. Then we demand an audit of all HOA finances and figure out where that $47,000 went. And if she refuses to step down." Jim smiled grimly. "Then we call the police and report her for fraud. We drafted the petition that night. 15 people signed it immediately." Jim filed it officially with the HOA the next morning, sending copies to all board members and posting notice on the community website as required by the bylaws. Patricia's response came that afternoon in the form of a mass email to the entire neighborhood. "Dear Riverside Meadows residents, it has come to my attention that certain individuals are attempting to undermine the HOA leadership and disrupt our community standards. These individuals are spreading false information about HOA operations and encouraging non-compliance with community covenants. Please be advised that any homeowner who participates in these activities may be subject to additional scrutiny regarding covenant compliance. The HOA board stands united in our commitment to maintaining property values and community standards. Sincerely, Patricia Hendricks, HOA President." The email was a tactical error on her part. The phrase "united in our commitment" caught my attention immediately. I forwarded it to Jim. "Did you see this? She says the board is united, but has she even talked to the other board members?" Jim had the same thought. "Let me make some calls." It turned out that none of the other 4 board members had known about Patricia's email. More importantly, 2 of them had not even known that Patricia had been issuing fines. She had apparently been sending violation notices and collecting payments without informing the rest of the board at all. Board member Thomas Wu was a dentist who worked 60-hour weeks and had agreed to serve on the board mostly because no one else wanted to do it. He had not attended a meeting in over a year because Patricia kept scheduling them at times he could not make. Board member Linda Foster was a retired teacher who had recently gone through cancer treatment. She had asked Patricia to handle things while she recovered and had assumed everything was being done properly. The other 2 board members, Gregory Nash and Susan Thornton, were equally in the dark. When Jim contacted them and explained what had been happening, they were horrified. Within 48 hours, we had all 4 of the other board members signed onto a joint statement calling for Patricia's immediate resignation and an independent audit of HOA finances. They also voted unanimously to suspend all outstanding fines pending review. The emergency HOA meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday at the community center. According to the bylaws, Patricia had to attend as president, and she could not prevent it from happening once the proper petition had been filed. The days leading up to the meeting were tense. Patricia sent individual text messages to several homeowners, including me, threatening legal action for defamation and harassment. I forwarded all of mine to Jim, who assured me they were empty threats designed to intimidate. She also began issuing new violations with abandon. Suddenly, half the neighborhood was getting notices for minor infractions that had been ignored for years. Mailbox slightly crooked, violation. Garden gnome not on the approved decorations list. Violation. Car parked 6 inches too far from the curb. Violation. It backfired spectacularly. Instead of scaring people into submission, it united the neighborhood against her. By the time Tuesday arrived, over 60 homeowners had confirmed they would attend the meeting, an unprecedented turnout. I spent Tuesday afternoon preparing my statement. I planned to present all the documentation we had gathered, lay out exactly what Patricia had been doing, and call for her immediate removal. Jim had advised me to stay calm and stick to facts. Let the evidence speak for itself. The meeting was scheduled to start at 7 p.m. I arrived at 6:30 and found the parking lot already half full. Inside the community center, rows of folding chairs had been set up facing a table where the board members would sit. More chairs were being added as people kept arriving. Patricia walked in at 6:55 wearing a navy pantsuit and carrying a briefcase. She looked composed and professional, every inch the competent HOA president. She took her seat at the center of the board table and arranged her papers in front of her. The other board members took their seats, none of them making eye contact with Patricia. The tension was palpable. At 7 p.m. sharp, Patricia called the meeting to order. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending this emergency meeting of the Riverside Meadows Homeowners Association. Before we begin with the agenda items, I want to address the unfortunate situation that has prompted this gathering. There have been allegations made against me and the HOA leadership. These allegations are based on misunderstandings and incomplete information. I want to assure all residents that every action I have taken has been in strict accordance with our community covenants and in the best interest of maintaining our property values. She continued talking, but I noticed that people were starting to shift uncomfortably in their seats. Patricia's tone was condescending, as if she were explaining something obvious to children who just were not smart enough to understand. The role of HOA president is not an easy one, she went on. It requires making difficult decisions and enforcing rules that some people may find inconvenient. But these rules exist for a reason. Without proper enforcement, our community would descend into chaos. Property values would plummet. It is my duty, my responsibility to prevent that from happening. Thomas Wu cleared his throat. Patricia, I think we should move on to the actual agenda items. People did not come here to listen to a speech. They came for answers. Patricia's smile tightened. Of course, Thomas. The first agenda item is the petition for my removal as president. I assume someone wants to present the case for this petition. Jim stood up from the audience. I will. For the record, I am Jim Kowalski, resident of 428 Maple Drive and member of the Illinois Bar. I am speaking tonight both as a homeowner and as legal counsel for several residents who have been affected by improper HOA actions. He walked to the front of the room and connected his laptop to the projector. The spreadsheet we had created appeared on the screen showing all the fines Patricia had issued. Ladies and gentlemen board members, what you are looking at is a comprehensive record of fines issued by Patricia Hendricks over the past 24 months. The total amount collected is $47,300. These fines were issued without board approval, in direct violation of the HOA bylaws, which clearly state that fines over $50 require a majority vote of the board. Patricia interrupted. That section of the bylaws is outdated. We amended them last year to give the president more authority for efficiency purposes. Really? Jim pulled up another document. Because I have the complete bylaws here, downloaded from the official HOA website 3 days ago, they show no such amendment. Furthermore, Any amendment to the bylaws requires a vote of the membership with a 2/3 majority. When was that vote held? Silence. There was no vote because there was no amendment. You simply started acting as if you had authority you did not actually have. Jim clicked to the next slide. But it gets worse. I have obtained bank records for the HOA's operating account through a legal records request filed with the bank. Patricia, as president, you are the primary signatory on this account. The records show that over the past 2 years, $47,000 in deposits were made to this account from various homeowners, matching exactly the amounts collected in fines. Of course they match, Patricia said. That is where fine payments are supposed to go. Into the HOA account for community expenses. Right. So then can you explain why there were also $32,000 in withdrawals from that same account, all made by check or debit card, none of which correspond to any authorized HOA expense? The room went dead silent. Patricia's face had gone pale. Those withdrawals were for legitimate HOA expenses, maintenance, landscaping, administrative costs. Jim shook his head. The HOA has separate contracts with vendors for all those services, and those vendors are paid through automatic transfers. I have the records. These withdrawals were something else. $32,000, Patricia. Where did it go? I do not have to answer to you. This is inappropriate and outside the scope of this meeting. Thomas Wu spoke up again. Actually, Patricia, you do have to answer. As board members, we have a fiduciary duty to the HOA. If there are unexplained expenses, we need to know about them. Where did that money go? Patricia stood up, gathering her papers. I will not sit here and be interrogated like a criminal. This meeting is a farce. I am leaving. Sit down, Patricia. The voice came from Linda Foster, the retired teacher who had been quiet until now. There was a steely quality to her tone that made everyone, including Patricia, freeze. You are not leaving until we get answers. $32,000 is missing. That is our money. The homeowner's money. Where is it? It is not missing. It has been spent on HOA business. What business, specifically? Patricia sat back down slowly. I could see her mind working, trying to figure out how to explain this. Finally, she said, legal fees. We have had to consult with attorneys regarding various covenant enforcement issues. Jim was ready for this. Funny you should mention that. I contacted the law firm listed on the HOA's official documents as your legal counsel. They confirmed they have not done any work for the HOA in over 3 years. So, who were you paying legal fees to? The trap had been sprung. Patricia had no answer that would not incriminate her further. She sat there silent, as the weight of what she had done settled over the room. Denise Park stood up from her seat. You stole from us. You made up fake fines, collected our money, and spent it on yourself. That is absurd. I would never do such a thing. Then show us the receipts, someone called from the back. Show us proof of where the money went. I do not have to prove anything to you people. I have devoted 2 years of my life to managing this community, dealing with your complaints, enforcing the rules that keep this neighborhood respectable. And this is the thanks I get: accusations and harassment. Susan Thornton, one of the board members who had been silent until now, leaned forward. Patricia, as of this moment, you are suspended as HOA president pending a full investigation. The board will appoint an interim president, and we will be conducting a complete audit of all HOA finances. If you have nothing to hide, you will cooperate fully. If you refuse, we will have no choice but to contact the police. You cannot suspend me. The homeowners elected me. The bylaws give the board authority to suspend any officer for cause, pending a vote of the membership. We have cause. The motion is made. Do I have a second? Second. said Thomas Wu immediately. All in favor, 4 hands went up. Patricia's was the only one that stayed down. The motion carries. Patricia, you are suspended effective immediately. Please surrender all HOA property, including keys, files, and access to the bank accounts. For a moment, I thought Patricia might actually refuse. She sat there, rigid, her face red with anger or embarrassment or both. Then she opened her briefcase, pulled out a key ring and a credit card, and slammed them on the table. You are all making a huge mistake. When this is over, when you realize how much work goes into running an HOA, you will be begging me to come back. And I will not. You can all deal with the chaos yourselves. She stood up and walked out, her heels clicking sharply on the tile floor. Nobody stopped her. The door swung shut behind her, and everyone seemed to exhale at once. The rest of the meeting was spent organizing next steps. Thomas Wu agreed to serve as interim president. A committee was formed to conduct the financial audit. Jim offered his legal services pro bono to help the HOA recover any stolen funds. And I was asked to join the board as a temporary member to fill Patricia's vacant seat until a proper election could be held. I said yes. After everything that had happened, I felt obligated to help fix the mess. The meeting adjourned around 9:30. As people filed out, several came up to thank me for starting all of this. Martha Chen hugged me. Robert Williams shook my hand so vigorously I thought my arm might fall off. Even Sylvia Morrison, who had always been friendly with Patricia, apologized for not standing up sooner. Jim and I stayed behind to help clean up the community center. As we were folding chairs, he said, "You know this is not over, right? Patricia is not going to just disappear. She is going to fight back." "I know, but we have the evidence. We have the board on our side now. What can she really do?" Never underestimate a cornered narcissist. Just be careful. His warning turned out to be prophetic. The next morning, I woke up to find my mailbox had been spray painted with obscenities. My car, parked in my driveway, had all 4 tires slashed. And someone had dumped a bag of garbage across my front lawn. I called the police immediately. Officer Martinez came out to take a report. He looked tired. "Let me guess," he said. "This is related to the HOA situation." "How did you know?" "Because I took 3 other similar calls this morning." Jim Kowalski's house was egged. Thomas Wu had his windows broken. Someone dumped motor oil across Linda Foster's driveway. He shook his head. "Look, I know you think it is Patricia, and you are probably right, but without proof or witnesses, there is not much I can do except file reports." "What about the fraud?" "Jim gathered all the evidence about the money she stole." "That is civil, not criminal. You would need to sue the HOA or convince the HOA to press charges. And even then, you would need to prove she spent the money on personal expenses, not HOA business. It is not impossible, but it is complicated. After Martinez left, I started cleaning up the mess. Jim came over to help, and then Denise, and soon I had a whole crew of neighbors working to repair the vandalism. Someone drove me to a tire shop. Someone else brought paint remover for the mailbox. By noon, most of the damage had been addressed, though I was out about $600 for the tires. The vandalism continued sporadically over the next week. Nothing major enough to warrant police investigation, but constant enough to be harassing. Someone kept leaving dog waste on various doorsteps. Cars got keyed. Garden decorations went missing. The neighborhood was on edge. Meanwhile, the financial audit was revealing the full extent of Patricia's misconduct. The committee discovered that, in addition to the fines she had collected without authorization, she had also been padding expense reports for HOA maintenance. She would submit invoices for landscaping work that was never done, or claim reimbursement for supplies that were never purchased. Over 2 years, she had systematically embezzled nearly $50,000. Thomas Wu called an emergency board meeting to discuss options. We met at Jim's house rather than the community center, partly for convenience and partly because we were all feeling a bit paranoid about Patricia showing up. "We have enough evidence to file criminal charges," Jim said, laying out the documentation. Bank records, false invoices, testimony from vendors confirming work was never done. The state's attorney would definitely take this case. "Will we get the money back?" Linda asked. "Probably not all of it. Restitution takes time, and that is assuming Patricia has not already spent everything. But at least she would face consequences." "What about the vandalism?" I asked. "Can we tie her to that?" "Not directly. But once there are criminal charges filed, the police will take the harassment more seriously. They might be able to build a case." We voted unanimously to file a formal complaint with the Naperville Police Department and provide all our evidence to the state's attorney's office. Thomas made the call right there from Jim's living room. 2 days later, Detective Sarah Chen showed up at my door. She was in her mid-30s, professional and direct. "Mr. Ingram, I am investigating the allegations against Patricia Hendricks. I have reviewed the financial documents your HOA provided, and I would like to ask you some questions about the timeline of events and your interactions with Miss Hendricks." I invited her in and spent the next 2 hours going through everything from the midnight Blowtorch incident to the meeting where Patricia was suspended. Detective Chen took detailed notes and asked clarifying questions. "The case is pretty solid," she said finally. "The financial evidence alone is enough for theft charges, but I am also interested in the harassment campaign. You believe Miss Hendricks is responsible?" "I do, but I do not have proof." "Leave that to me. In the meantime, I want you to document everything. Every incident, every message, every interaction. Photos, timestamps, witnesses. The more documentation we have, the better." She stood up to leave, then paused. "One more thing. Be prepared for this to get uglier before it gets better. When people like Patricia feel their control slipping away, they tend to escalate. Watch your back." Her words were more accurate than I wanted them to be. That Saturday, I was out running errands when I got a frantic call from Denise. Her voice was shaking. "Warren, you need to come back to the neighborhood right now. Patricia is going house to house with a lawyer, serving people with lawsuits." "What? For what?" "Defamation. She is suing everyone who attended that meeting for destroying her reputation. I just got served." So did Jim and Martha and about 20 other people. I raced home to find absolute chaos on my street. Patricia was indeed walking from house to house accompanied by a man in an expensive suit, handing out legal documents. People were gathered in small groups, looking at the papers in shock and confusion. I parked and approached Patricia directly. "What are you doing?" She turned to me with a smile that did not reach her eyes. "Hello, Warren. I am serving you notice of a civil lawsuit for defamation, harassment, and conspiracy to damage my reputation. You will be hearing from my attorney." She handed me a thick envelope. "This is insane. You stole money from the HOA. We have proof. You have allegations and speculation. What you do not have is a conviction. And in this country, people are innocent until proven guilty. By spreading these false accusations, you and your friends have damaged my professional reputation and caused me severe emotional distress. I am seeking $2 million in damages to be split among all defendants." The lawyer next to her, whose name I learned was Richard Stoltz, spoke up. "Miss Hendricks has every right to defend herself against false accusations. I advise all of you to retain legal counsel immediately." We will see you in court." They moved on to the next house. I stood there holding the envelope, trying to process what was happening. Jim came jogging up, his own envelope in hand. "This is a slap suit," he said, scanning through the documents. "Strategic lawsuit against public participation. She is trying to intimidate us into backing down by threatening expensive litigation. It is probably not going anywhere, but it will cost us all money to defend against. Can she do this? She can file it. Whether it survives a motion to dismiss is another question. But yes, this is going to be a problem." The problem got worse over the next few days as more details emerged. Patricia had taken out a home equity loan and borrowed money from family to fund this legal attack. She had hired Stoltz, who had a reputation as an aggressive litigator who specialized in drawn-out cases. She was clearly going all in on this strategy. The lawsuit created a divide in the neighborhood. Some people, scared of legal costs and hassle, started saying maybe we should have just left well enough alone. Others became more determined than ever to see Patricia held accountable. Several people dropped out of the case entirely, settling privately with Patricia and agreeing not to testify against her. I was not backing down, and neither was Jim or the core group of people who had organized the evidence gathering. But the stress was real. I was spending hours every day dealing with this situation. My work was suffering. My sleep was suffering. I was living on coffee and anxiety. Then Detective Chen called with news. "We have got her on the vandalism, or at least we have got her on one incident." "How?" "Ring doorbell camera. One of your neighbors, Dana Phillips 3 streets over, has a camera that caught Patricia dumping garbage on Jim Kowalski's lawn at 3 in the morning last Tuesday. Clear footage, unmistakable identification. That is criminal mischief, and combined with the pattern of harassment, we can charge her." That is great news. It gets better. When we ran Patricia's financials as part of the theft investigation, we found some interesting patterns. Large cash withdrawals right before unexplained deposits into her personal account. Credit card charges at high-end stores that do not match any HOA expenses. She was not even smart about hiding it. We have enough to charge her with theft by deception and official misconduct. When? Arrest warrant is being issued today. We will pick her up tomorrow morning. I called Jim immediately to share the news. He whooped so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "This changes everything," he said. "Once she is charged criminally, her civil lawsuit loses all credibility. You cannot sue people for defamation when you are being prosecuted for the exact thing they accused you of. We can get the whole thing dismissed." The next morning, I happened to be leaving for work at the exact moment an unmarked police car pulled up to Patricia's house. Detective Chen and another officer walked to her front door. I probably should not have watched, but I could not help myself. Patricia answered the door in a bathrobe, clearly surprised. There was a brief conversation I could not hear, and then Chen said something that made Patricia's face go white. She nodded and went back inside, emerging a few minutes later dressed in jeans and a sweater, her hands cuffed in front of her. They loaded her into the car and drove away. It was not dramatic or exciting. It was just sad, watching someone who had wielded so much petty power in our neighborhood being driven away in handcuffs because she could not help but abuse that power. The neighborhood grapevine went into overdrive. By noon, everyone knew Patricia had been arrested. By evening, the local news had picked up the story. HOA president arrested for embezzlement ran as the lead story on the 6 o'clock broadcast, complete with footage of our neighborhood and interviews with residents. My phone would not stop ringing. Reporters wanted interviews. Neighbors wanted details. My mother called to make sure I was okay and to tell me she had always known there was something off about Patricia. The court proceedings took months. Patricia pleaded not guilty initially and tried to fight the charges, but the evidence was overwhelming. Eventually, her own lawyer convinced her to take a plea deal. She pleaded guilty to theft by deception and criminal mischief in exchange for a reduced sentence. At her sentencing hearing, which I attended along with Jim, Thomas, and several other neighbors, Patricia finally showed some emotion. She cried as the judge read through the charges and the evidence. She apologized to the court and to the neighborhood, though her apology felt perfunctory and self-serving. The judge was not sympathetic. "Miss Hendricks, you were placed in a position of trust by your community. You were elected to serve your neighbors, to manage their collective resources responsibly. Instead, you exploited that trust for personal gain. You stole money that was meant to maintain and improve your neighborhood. And when people questioned your actions, you lashed out with vandalism and harassment. This court takes such breaches of fiduciary duty very seriously." She sentenced Patricia to 18 months in county jail, followed by 3 years of probation. She also ordered full restitution of the stolen funds, plus court costs and fees. Patricia was led away in handcuffs, crying and protesting that the sentence was too harsh. As for the civil lawsuit, it was dismissed with prejudice 3 weeks after Patricia's arrest. Richard Stoltz dropped her as a client and the whole thing fell apart. We had won, but it felt more like relief than victory. The HOA held a special election for new leadership. Thomas Wu remained as president, with Linda Foster as vice president. I stayed on the board as treasurer, taking on the role of managing the finances and making sure nothing like Patricia's embezzlement could happen again. We implemented new policies requiring dual signatures on all checks over $100 and quarterly financial reports to the full membership. We also revised the covenant enforcement process. No more arbitrary fines issued by a single person. All violations now went through a review process with opportunities for homeowners to respond and appeal. We reduced the list of finnable offenses by about 60%, cutting out ridiculous rules about flower colors and mailbox styles. The neighborhood changed after everything that happened. People were more engaged, more aware of what the HOA was doing. Attendance at meetings went from a handful of people to dozens. Residents actually read the monthly newsletters. There was a sense of community that had not existed before, forged through shared adversity. Jim and I became close friends through the whole ordeal. We started a tradition of getting together every few months with the core group who had helped expose Patricia. We would barbecue, drink beer, and tell stories about the crazy HOA saga. It became part of neighborhood legend. The time Warren used a blowtorch at midnight and accidentally brought down a corrupt HOA president. The ice on the sidewalk, the thing that started it all, eventually melted when temperatures rose above freezing. The city did finally come and clear the remaining patches from the water main break, about 3 weeks too late. Nobody got fined for ice again. As for Patricia, she served 10 months of her sentence before being released on good behavior. She moved out of state, reportedly to live with family in Arizona. I heard through the grapevine that she tried to join her new HOA board and was unanimously rejected once they learned about her criminal record. Some people asked me if I felt bad about what happened to her, if I thought we had been too harsh or taken things too far. My answer was always the same. Patricia made her choices. She could have been a good HOA president, could have worked with people instead of against them. She chose to abuse her power, steal money, and harass people who questioned her. The consequences were entirely of her own making. I still live in Riverside Meadows. I still serve on the HOA board, though I have handed off the treasurer role to someone with an actual accounting background. My sidewalk is clear of ice in the winter, kept that way with reasonable applications of salt and the occasional careful use of a blowtorch when absolutely necessary, though I use it during daylight hours now. The blowtorch itself has become something of a neighborhood icon. Jim borrowed it a few times. Then Martha wanted to use it for a project. Eventually, we just designated it as community property, kept in the shed at the community center, available for anyone who needs to clear ice or do some light welding or caramelize a particularly stubborn creme brulee. There is even a joke name for it now, Patricia's downfall, because that is what it represents. The moment when someone pushed too hard, demanded too much, and discovered that people have limits to what they will tolerate. The whole experience taught me something important about communities and power and standing up for yourself. HOAs exist to maintain neighborhoods, but they are run by people. And people can be petty, vindictive, and corrupt. It is easy to assume someone else is handling things properly, to pay fines without questioning them, to go along with rules that do not make sense. But sometimes you have to stand up. Sometimes you have to say no, this is not right, this needs to change. Sometimes you have to clear ice at midnight with a blowtorch just to make a point. And sometimes, that small act of resistance is what it takes to expose a much bigger problem. I think about that text message sometimes, the one Patricia sent demanding I clear the ice or face fines. At the time, it felt like the weight of the world, like one more impossible demand from a person who seemed to take joy in making my life difficult. Now, it just seems like the universe giving me a push, forcing me to finally do something about a situation that had been wrong for a long time. If Patricia had not sent that message, if she had not threatened me with fines for something that was not my responsibility, I might never have looked into HOA finances. I might never have discovered the fraud. She might have continued stealing money for years. The neighborhood would have continued suffering under her authoritarian rule. So in a strange way, I am almost grateful to Patricia for being so unreasonable, for pushing so hard that I had no choice but to push back. She was her own worst enemy, escalating and threatening when a reasonable person would have compromised or looked the other way. The legal system worked the way it was supposed to work, slowly but surely. The investigation was thorough, the evidence was clear, and justice was served. Not perfect justice, maybe. 18 months in jail for stealing $50,000 and harassing dozens of people seems light to me, but it was something. It was accountability, and really that was all we wanted from the beginning. Not revenge, not destruction, just accountability. Just someone in authority admitting that what Patricia did was wrong and there would be consequences. Life in Riverside Meadows is quieter now. The drama has faded into history, replaced by normal neighborhood concerns like potholes and park maintenance, and which restaurant to order from for the summer block party. The HOA functions the way it is supposed to function, as a boring administrative body that handles boring administrative tasks. I still see Officer Martinez occasionally when he patrols through the neighborhood. He always waves and shakes his head with a smile, remembering the night he got called out for a man with a blowtorch at 1 in the morning. Detective Chen stopped by a few months after Patricia's sentencing to thank us for our cooperation in the investigation. She said it was one of the more satisfying cases she had worked, seeing a clear abuse of power actually result in consequences. My mother still brings up the whole situation at family gatherings, telling the story to relatives who have heard it a dozen times already, but pretend it is new. My dad bought me a small trophy with a blowtorch engraved on it and the caption, "Neighborhood Hero." It sits on my mantle, a ridiculous reminder of a ridiculous time. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had just paid Patricia's fine that night. If I had said, "Yes, madam," and found some way to clear the ice with conventional methods and kept my head down. Would someone else eventually have stood up to her? Or would she still be HOA president, still stealing money, still making everyone's lives miserable? I do not know. All I know is that I made a choice, a small choice in the moment, to do something different and unexpected. To clear ice with a blowtorch at midnight because it was technically what she asked for, even if it was not how she expected it to be done. And that small choice led to bigger choices, to investigations and confrontations, and ultimately to justice. It led to a better neighborhood, better leadership, and better oversight of how our community is run. The blowtorch is still in the community center shed. I checked on it last week. It is sitting there next to the lawn mower and some folding tables, ready for the next time someone needs to clear ice or make creme brulee, or stand up to an unreasonable demand from someone who thinks rules apply to everyone but themselves. I hope it never has to be used for that last purpose again. But if it does, if someone else in some other neighborhood faces their own Patricia demanding impossible things at unreasonable times, I hope they remember this story. I hope they remember that sometimes the right response to an unreasonable demand is not compliance, but creative resistance. Clear the ice at midnight with a blowtorch. Do what they ask, but do it your way. And if that small act of defiance exposes something bigger, something that needs to be exposed, then do not back down. Gather evidence. Find allies. Hold people accountable, because communities deserve better than petty tyrants who abuse their power. Neighborhoods deserve better than leaders who steal and lie and harass. And sometimes, it takes one person with a blowtorch to light the way forward.